Blood stained the snow beneath Hannah Newcombe as she gasped for breath, each inhale sending shards of pain through her ribs. Her husband, Victor, had disappeared into the pines minutes ago, taking their horse, their supplies, and any chance she had of surviving the brutal Dakota winter. The pistol he'd used to strike her lay discarded beside her body, its chamber empty. He hadn't even thought her worth the bullet. The year was 1878, and Hannah was 22 years old. She had married Victor Newcombe 3 years earlier, believing his promises of a good life in the Black Hills. The gold rush had brought thousands to Dakota territory, and Victor had sworn they would make their fortune. Instead, he'd brought her nothing but bruises and broken promises. Today, he had finally decided she was more burden than wife. Hannah tried to pull herself up, but the gash in her side seeped red into the pristine snow. Her vision blurred as the cold began to seep into her bones. The brutal January wind whipped through the pines above her, and as consciousness slipped away, she thought she heard hoofbeats on the path, but that was impossible. Nobody came this far into the woods in winter except fools and desperate men. Quentin Eastwood had been tracking a wounded elk for the better part of the afternoon. The animal was strong but bleeding badly, and he knew it wouldn't make it much farther. His horse, a sturdy piebald gelding named Buck, snorted as they followed the trail of dark droplets staining the white forest floor. Food was scarce in winter, and the settlement at Hill City was counting on his hunt. At 28, Quentin had spent most of his life in the wilderness. After serving as a scout during the war, he drifted west, eventually settling in the Black Hills. He wasn't a miner. He'd seen too many men lose their souls to gold fever, but made his living as a hunter and guide. The locals called him a cowboy, though he rarely worked cattle these days. The elk's trail suddenly veered sharply left, and Quentin frowned. Wounded animals rarely changed direction so drastically unless spooked. He nudged Buck forward cautiously, one hand resting on the rifle across his lap. As they rounded a thick stand of pines, he saw what had frightened the elk fresh horse tracks heading east, and beside them, something dark against the snow. Drawing closer, Quentin realized with a start that it wasn't an animal, it was a woman. Her dark hair fanned out against the snow and blood pooled beneath her still form. He dismounted quickly, kneeling beside her. She was young, pretty despite the ugly bruise forming on her temple, and when he pressed his fingers to her neck, he felt a faint pulse. "Madam," he said, gently shaking her shoulder. She didn't respond. "Madam, can you hear me?" The woman's eyelids fluttered but remained closed. Quentin glanced around, noting the single set of hoofprints leading away. Someone had left her here to die. His jaw tightened as he assessed her injuries: a head wound, possibly broken ribs, and a deep cut on her side that was still bleeding. She wouldn't last much longer in the cold. Hill City was at least 10 miles away. Quentin didn't hesitate. He removed his heavy wool coat and wrapped it around the woman, then carefully lifted her into his arms. She moaned softly but didn't wake. He managed to mount Buck while holding her, settling her across his lap as securely as possible. "Hang on," he murmured, though he doubted she could hear him. Just hang on. The journey back would be slow and treacherous. Darkness would fall soon, and the temperature with it. Quentin adjusted his hold on the woman, cradling her against his chest to share what warmth he could. He looked down at her pale face, wondering what kind of man would leave a woman to die alone in the wilderness. "Let's go, Buck," he said quietly. "We've got a long ride ahead." Hannah drifted in and out of consciousness, vaguely aware of motion, of being held securely against something warm. Pain radiated through her body with each jostling step, but the alternative, the cold, empty darkness that kept trying to claim her, seemed worse. She forced herself to focus on the steady heartbeat against her cheek. the strong arms holding her, the low voice occasionally murmuring reassurances. She didn't know how much time had passed when she finally managed to open her eyes. Night had fallen, and she could see stars through the tree branches above. She was moving, cradled against a man's chest as he rode through the forest. "Victor," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The man looked down at her, his face shadowed beneath his hat. "No, madam, my name's Quentin Eastwood. Found you in the woods. I'm taking you to Hill City to the doctor." Hannah tried to process his words, but her mind felt foggy. "Victor, my husband, he—" "Don't try to talk now," Quentin said gently. "Just rest. We've still got a ways to go." Hannah wanted to explain, to tell this stranger that her husband had tried to kill her, but darkness claimed her again before she could form the words. Quentin felt the woman go limp in his arms again. Her brief moment of consciousness was promising, but he worried about the head wound. He'd seen men die from less during the war. The trail was becoming steeper now, winding down through the hills toward the settlement. In daylight, he could have taken a more direct route, but at night, with a wounded woman in his arms, he had to stick to the paths he knew well. The moon rose higher, casting silver light across the snow-covered landscape. Buck was tiring, his breaths coming in cloudy puffs, but the loyal horse continued steadily forward. Quentin had lost feeling in his exposed hands and face hours ago, but he barely noticed, focused entirely on keeping the woman secure and getting her to help. "Almost there," he told her, though she couldn't hear. "Just hold on a little longer." The lights of Hill City appeared in the distance just as Quentin was beginning to fear they wouldn't make it. The small settlement was nestled in a valley, a collection of wooden buildings surrounded by pines. Most windows were dark at this late hour, but Quentin knew exactly where to go. Dr. Edward Miller's house stood at the edge of town, a modest two-story structure with a small sign by the door. A light still burned in the downstairs window, and Quentin offered silent thanks for the doctor's insomnia. He guided Buck right up to the front porch and managed to dismount without jostling the woman too badly. He kicked at the door, unable to knock with his arms full. "Doc Miller, open up." After a moment, the door swung open to reveal a disheveled man in his 50s, spectacles perched on his nose. "Eastwood, what in God's name found her in the woods?" Quentin explained quickly, pushing past the doctor into the warmth of the house. "Someone left her for dead. She's lost blood, maybe has broken ribs, been unconscious most of the ride." Dr. Miller immediately shifted into professional mode, clearing books from a table in his front room. "Put her here, gently now." Quentin laid the woman down carefully, reluctant to release her after holding her for so many hours. As the light fell across her face, he saw how young she was, no more than 25, with delicate features beneath the dirt and bruising. "What's her name?" the doctor asked, already examining her wounds. "Don't know," Quentin admitted. "She woke briefly, asked for someone named Victor, think he might be her husband." "Well, whoever he is, he did quite a number on her," Dr. Miller said grimly, lifting the blood-soaked fabric of her dress. "This looks like a pistol whipping, and there's a knife wound here." Quentin's jaw tightened. "Will she live?" The doctor didn't answer immediately, continuing his examination. "Hard to say. She's young and seems strong, but she's lost a lot of blood, and I'm concerned about that head wound." "Where exactly did you find her?" "About 10 miles out, near the old mining trail. Whoever left her there didn't expect her to be found." 10 miles. The doctor looked up sharply. "You carried her 10 miles in this weather?" Quentin shrugged uncomfortably. "Couldn't just leave her, doctor." Miller shook his head, a hint of admiration in his expression. "Well, if she survives, it'll be thanks to you. Now get yourself by the fire before you freeze to death too. I need to work." Quentin reluctantly moved to the fireplace, his stiff limbs protesting. Only now did he realize how cold and exhausted he was. He watched as the doctor cut away the woman's clothing, cleaned her wounds, and stitched the gash in her side. Throughout it all, she remained unconscious, her face deathly pale. "Will you look for him?" Dr. Miller asked as he worked. "This Victor?" Quentin stared into the flames. "Yes." The single word contained a promise. When Hannah opened her eyes again, she was lying in a soft bed, covered with thick blankets. Sunlight streamed through a nearby window, illuminating unfamiliar surroundings. She tried to sit up, only to gasp as pain shot through her side. "Easy there," a gentle voice cautioned. "You'll tear your stitches." Hannah turned her head to see an older man with kind eyes and a neatly trimmed beard approaching the bed. He wore spectacles and a somewhat rumpled shirt. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice scratchy and weak. "You're in Hill City, in my home. I'm Dr. Edward Miller." He picked up a glass of water from the bedside table and helped her take a few sips. "Do you remember what happened to you?" Hannah closed her eyes as memories flooded back Victor's rage, the blow to her head, the knife cutting into her side as she tried to fight him off, then the cold as he rode away, leaving her to die. "My husband," she whispered. We were arguing. He wanted to leave to try his luck in Deadwood. I wanted to go home, back east." She touched her side gingerly. "He got angry, said I was holding him back." The doctor's expression darkened. "He left you to die in the woods." It wasn't a question, but Hannah nodded anyway, tears filling her eyes. Did someone find him?" "Not yet. The sheriff's been notified, but with this weather." Dr. Miller trailed off, then changed the subject. "Do you remember anything after that, about how you got here?" Hannah frowned, trying to piece together the fragmented memories. "Someone found me. A man, he carried me. I remember being on a horse." "That would be Quentin Eastwood," Dr. Miller said with a small smile. "Local hunter. Carried you 10 miles through the snow to get you here. Probably saved your life." 10 miles. Hannah whispered, stunned by the thought of a stranger going to such lengths for her. "Indeed. Stubborn man refused to leave until he knew you'd pull through. He's been checking in daily." The doctor paused. "May I ask your name, my dear?" "Hannah Newcombe." "Well, Mrs. Newcombe, you're very lucky. That knife wound missed anything vital, though you lost a fair amount of blood. The head injury concerns me more, but you seem lucid enough now." He patted her hand. "Rest. I'll bring you some broth later." After the doctor left, Hannah stared at the ceiling, trying to process everything. Her husband had tried to kill her. A stranger had saved her life. She was alive, but completely alone in a town she'd never set foot in before, with no money and nowhere to go. A tear slid down her cheek, followed by another. Within moments, she was sobbing quietly, the enormity of her situation overwhelming her. She didn't hear the door open, didn't realize someone had entered until a deep voice spoke. "Mrs. Newcombe, I apologize for intruding. The doctor said you were awake." Hannah hastily wiped her eyes and looked up to see a tall man standing awkwardly by the door. He had removed his hat, revealing dark hair that fell to his shoulders. His face was weathered by sun and wind, but his eyes were kind of striking blue that reminded her of summer skies. She recognized him vaguely from her hazy memories of the journey. "Mr. Eastwood?" she asked. He nodded, looking uncomfortable. "Just wanted to see how you were faring." "The doctor says you saved my life," Hannah said softly. "I don't know how to thank you." Quentin shifted his weight, clearly unused to gratitude. Any decent man would have done the same. "But they didn't. You did." She studied him for a moment. "Please come sit. Tell me how you found me." Quentin hesitated, then moved to the chair beside her bed. He explained about tracking the elk, finding her in the snow, and the journey back to Hill City. He spoke matter-of-factly, downplaying the difficulty and danger of carrying her so far in the brutal cold. "The sheriff's looking for your husband," he said when he'd finished his account. "Man like that shouldn't be walking free." Hannah looked down at her hands. "Victor's clever, he'll be long gone by now." She hesitated, then asked, "What happens to me now?" Quentin frowned. "What do you mean?" "I have nothing, Mr. Eastwood. No money, no family nearby. Victor controlled everything." She tried to keep her voice steady. "I don't even have proper clothes anymore." Understanding dawned in Quentin's eyes. "You've got nothing to worry about, Mrs. Newcombe. Doc Miller won't throw you out, and folks here are decent. Once you're well enough, we'll figure something out." The word slipped out before she could stop it. A faint color touched Quentin's cheeks. "The town, I mean, we take care of our own here." "But I'm not one of your own," Hannah pointed out gently. "You are now," Quentin said simply, and something in his voice made Hannah believe him. Over the next 2 weeks, Hannah recovered slowly under Dr. Miller's care. True to Quentin's word, the people of Hill City rallied around her. The doctor's housekeeper, a no-nonsense widow named Mrs. Perkins, brought her clothes and toiletries. The sheriff, a gruff man named Thompson, took her statement and promised to keep looking for Victor, though they both knew the chances of finding him diminished with each passing day. And Quentin Eastwood visited daily, sometimes just for a few minutes, sometimes staying longer to tell her about the town and its inhabitants. Hannah found herself looking forward to his visits, to his quiet, steady presence and occasional dry humor. He never asked for details about her marriage or pressed her to talk about Victor, which she appreciated. By early February, Hannah was strong enough to move about the house. Dr. Miller had given her a small room upstairs, refusing payment despite her protests. "Consider it my contribution to thwarting a would-be murderer," he'd said when she brought up the subject of rent. "Besides, Mrs. Perkins appreciates having another woman in the house." Hannah did her best to earn her keep, helping with cooking and mending when she could. Her side still ached, especially in the cold, but she was healing. Her biggest concern now was what would happen when she was fully recovered. Without money or skills beyond basic housekeeping, her options were limited. She was contemplating this problem while folding laundry one afternoon when a knock came at the front door. Mrs. Perkins was at the Mercantile, and Dr. Miller was visiting a patient, so Hannah went to answer it herself. Quentin stood on the porch, hat in hand. "Mrs. Newcombe," he greeted her, eyes quickly assessing her appearance. "You're looking well. Please call me Hannah," she said, smiling. "After all you've done, formality seems silly." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Hannah, then. I wondered if you might like to get some fresh air. It's not too cold today, and you've been cooped up for weeks." Hannah hesitated only briefly. The prospect of escaping the house, even for a short while, was tempting. "I'd like that. Let me get my coat Mrs. Perkins's coat that she's letting me borrow." Quentin waited patiently as she bundled up, then offered his arm as they stepped outside. The air was crisp but not bitterly cold, the sun shining in a clear blue sky. Hannah breathed deeply, savoring the feeling of freedom. "I thought we might walk through town," Quentin suggested. "Not too far, but enough for you to get your bearings." Hannah nodded, grateful for his consideration of her still healing body. They moved slowly down the main street, Quentin pointing out various buildings: the Mercantile, the small hotel, the sheriff's office, the saloon. Hill City wasn't large, just a few dozen buildings clustered in the valley, but it was bigger than Hannah had expected. "How long have you lived here?" she asked as they paused to let a wagon pass. "About 3 years," Quentin replied. "Came west after the war, drifted for a while before settling here." "You fought in the war?" Hannah glanced up at him, trying to gauge his age. He couldn't be much more than 30, Joined up in '64 when I was 16, lied about my age. His expression grew distant. Served as a scout mostly. Saw enough to know I didn't want to see more. Hannah nodded, understanding in her eyes. Her own father had fought for the Union, had come back changed in ways her young self couldn't comprehend. And now you hunt, guide, hunt, track, Quentin shrugged. Whatever's needed. The mines bring people with money, but no sense about the wilderness. They pay well to be kept alive. They continued walking, Hannah growing more comfortable with both the exercise and the conversation. Quentin had a quiet way about him, never pushing for more than she was willing to give, yet somehow making it easy to talk. As they passed a small building with a sign reading Hill City Gazette, a woman emerged, nearly colliding with them. She was perhaps 40, with sharp features and intelligent eyes. "Quentin Eastwood, as I live and breathe," she said, looking between them with obvious interest. "And this must be Mrs. Newcombe. I'm Margaret Wilson, editor of our little newspaper." Hannah shook the offered hand. "Pleased to meet you." "Likewise. I've been hoping to speak with you, actually. Would you consider letting me interview you for the Gazette? Your story could serve as a warning to other women about Mrs. Wilson," Quentin interrupted firmly. "Mrs. Newcombe is still recovering and isn't giving interviews." The editor looked briefly annoyed, then smiled. "Of course, forgive my enthusiasm. Perhaps another time." She turned to Hannah. "When you're ready, my dear, and if you need work, I could use someone with a steady hand for typesetting." After she'd gone, Hannah looked up at Quentin with a mixture of amusement and gratitude. "You didn't have to protect me, though I appreciate it." Quentin looked uncomfortable. "She means well, but she can be persistent, and you shouldn't have to relive that day just to sell newspapers." "No, but I might take her up on the job offer," Hannah mused as they continued walking. "I'll need work soon." Quentin frowned slightly. "You've thought about staying in Hill City then?" "Where else would I go?" Hannah asked simply. "I have no money for a train ticket east, no family expecting me, and Victor." She trailed off, then continued more softly. "Victor might still be looking for me, if he learns I survived." Something dangerous flashed in Quentin's eyes. "If he shows his face in Hill City, he won't live long enough to find you." The quiet vehemence in his voice startled Hannah. She'd never had someone willing to protect her so fiercely before. Her father had died when she was 18, and Victor had initially seemed like protection from a harsh world, until he'd become the thing she most needed protection from. "Thank you," she said softly, "but I hope it never comes to that." They walked in silence for a moment, then Quentin spoke again. "There's another option, for work, I mean." Hannah looked at him expectantly. "Mrs. Foster at the hotel needs help, cleaning rooms, serving meals. She mentioned it yesterday when I was there." He hesitated. "The pay isn't much, but it includes a room. You'd have your own place." Hannah considered this. Independence was tempting, as kind as Dr. Miller and Mrs. Perkins had been. She felt the burden of their charity daily. "I'll speak with her," she decided. "Thank you for telling me." They completed their circuit of the town and returned to the doctor's house. Hannah was tired but felt better than she had in weeks. As they reached the porch, she turned to Quentin. "Would you like to come in for coffee? Mrs. Perkins always keeps some hot." Quentin shook his head regretfully. "Can't today. I'm guiding a hunting party at dawn tomorrow, need to prepare." He hesitated, then added, "I'll be gone about a week. Will you be all right?" The concern in his voice warmed her. "I'll be fine. Perhaps by the time you return, I'll have secured that position at the hotel." Quentin nodded, seeming relieved. "I'll check on you when I get back." As Hannah watched him walk away, she realized how much she'd come to depend on his daily visits, his quiet strength. The thought of not seeing him for a week left her feeling oddly bereft. That evening she mentioned Mrs. Foster's need for help to Dr. Miller. The doctor nodded thoughtfully. Emma Foster's a fair employer, though she runs a tight ship. If you're considering it, you should know you're welcome to stay here as long as needed. You've been more than generous, Hannah said sincerely, but I need to stand on my own feet again. And having my own room, my own income, it would help me feel less like a victim. Dr. Miller's eyes were kind. You're a remarkable young woman, Hannah Newcombe. Most people wouldn't recover so quickly from what you've endured, not just physically but in spirit. Hannah smiled wryly. Don't mistake necessity for strength, doctor. I simply have no choice but to move forward. The following day, Hannah visited the Hill City Hotel and spoke with Mrs. Foster, a brisk, efficient widow in her 50s who ran the establishment with military precision. After asking a few pointed questions about Hannah's experience and physical capabilities, she offered her the position. Room and board plus $2 a week, Mrs. Foster stated. Days start early, end late. Sundays half-day only. You'll have a small room on the 3rd floor, nothing fancy but clean and private. When can you start? Would Monday next week be acceptable? Hannah asked. I'd like to give Dr. Miller and Mrs. Perkins proper notice and ensure my strength is up to the work. Mrs. Foster nodded approvingly. Sensible. Monday it is. Be here at 5 in the morning. Breakfast for the guests starts at 6 sharp. As Hannah walked back to the doctor's house, she felt a curious mixture of apprehension and hope. The work would be hard, especially while she was still healing, but it represented a fresh start, a chance to rebuild her life on her own terms. For the first time since that terrible day in the woods, Hannah allowed herself to think beyond mere survival. The week passed quickly as Hannah prepared for her new position. Mrs. Perkins helped her alter some donated dresses to fit better, and Dr. Miller insisted on giving her a small sum of money. Consider it advance payment for all the mending you've done, he said when she protested. Even Sheriff Thompson contributed, bringing her a sturdy pair of boots that had belonged to his late wife. Hannah was touched by the town's generosity, but a small part of her wondered if their kindness would continue once the novelty of her situation wore off. She had experienced the fickle nature of people's sympathy before, when her father died and initial offers of help gradually disappeared. On Sunday evening, her last night at the doctor's house, Hannah sat by the fire after dinner, mending one last shirt for Dr. Miller. Mrs. Perkins had retired early, and the doctor was writing in his journal at his desk. The quiet domesticity of the scene made Hannah's throat tighten with emotion. A knock at the door startled her. Dr. Miller rose to answer it, and moments later, Quentin Eastwood stepped into the room. His face was wind-burned, his clothes travel-stained, but his eyes immediately sought Hannah's. "You're back," she said, unable to hide her pleasure at seeing him. "Just got in," Quentin confirmed. "Thought I'd see how you were faring, Doctor." Miller excused himself tactfully, leaving them alone by the fire. Quentin took the seat opposite Hannah, stretching his long legs toward the warmth. "Successful trip?" Hannah asked, setting aside her mending. Quentin nodded. "Enough meat to feed half the town. The miners paid well." He studied her face. "You look better, stronger." "I feel better," Hannah agreed. "Strong enough to start work tomorrow, in fact. Mrs. Foster hired me at the hotel." Something flashed across Quentin's face, concern, perhaps, or disappointment. "That's good," he said after a moment. "Mrs. Foster's strict but fair." "So I've heard," Hannah replied. "I'll have my own room, my own income. It's a start." Quentin nodded slowly. "It's good to be independent." An awkward silence fell between them. Hannah had the sense that Quentin wanted to say more but was holding back. Finally, she broke the silence. "Thank you for checking on me. I appreciate that you thought of me, especially after such a long journey." Quentin's gaze met hers, direct and intense. "I thought of you every day I was gone," he said quietly. The simple honesty of his words caught Hannah off guard. Before she could respond, Quentin stood abruptly. "I should go. You need rest before tomorrow." He moved toward the door, then paused. "If you need anything at all, you know where to find me." After he'd gone, Hannah remained by the fire, replaying his words in her mind. "I thought of you every day I was gone." The admission stirred something in her that she'd thought Victor had killed long ago, hope, perhaps, or the faint stirring of desire. But it was too soon, she reminded herself firmly. Her husband had tried to murder her barely a month ago. Her body was still healing, as was her spirit. Whatever she felt for Quentin Eastwood, gratitude, friendship, or something more, would have to wait until she found her footing in this new life. Hannah's first week at the Hill City Hotel was exhausting but satisfying. The work was hard, changing linens, scrubbing floors, serving meals, washing endless stacks of dishes, but Mrs. Foster was indeed a fair employer, and the other hotel staff accepted Hannah readily enough. Her room on the third floor was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a small chest for her few belongings. The window overlooked the main street, and in the early mornings, Hannah would sometimes catch glimpses of Quentin heading out of town on hunting expeditions. He visited her at the hotel occasionally, usually in the afternoons when she took her brief rest period. They would sit in the small lobby, drinking coffee and talking. Hannah learned more about him: how he'd been born in Pennsylvania, had lost his parents young and been raised by an uncle, had drifted west after the war seeking something he couldn't quite name. In turn, she told him about her own life, her childhood in Ohio, her father's death, how she'd met Victor at a church social and been swept away by his charm and promises. "I was young and naive," she admitted during one such conversation. "He seemed so worldly, so sure of himself. My mother had died years before, and with my father gone too, I was alone. Victor offered security, a future." "That's not naive," Quentin said quietly. "That's human." Hannah smiled gratefully at him. "Perhaps, but I ignored the warning signs. His temper, his drinking, how he isolated me from friends. By the time we headed west, I was already afraid of him, but I didn't know how to leave." Quentin's expression darkened. "Men like that count on fear. They feed on it." "Yes," Hannah agreed softly, "and for a long time fear worked. Until that day in the woods when he finally went too far." She looked down at her hands. "The strange thing is, now that I know I can survive his worst, I'm not afraid anymore." Quentin reached across the small table between them and briefly touched her hand, the first time he'd initiated physical contact since carrying her from the woods. "Good," he said simply. As February turned to March, Hannah settled into life in Hill City. The brutal winter began to loosen its grip, and with the warming weather came more travelers to the hotel. Hannah found herself busy from dawn until dusk, but she enjoyed the rhythm of the work and the independence it provided. She made friends among the townspeople: Margaret Wilson from the newspaper, who still occasionally hinted at wanting Hannah's story but respected her reluctance; Sarah Johnson, the young schoolteacher who loaned Hannah books; and Eliza Cooper, who ran the mercantile with her husband and invited Hannah to Sunday dinners. But it was Quentin's friendship that meant the most to her. He was often away, sometimes for days at a time, but he always sought her out upon returning. Their conversations grew more comfortable, more intimate, and Hannah found herself sharing thoughts and feelings she'd never voiced aloud before. "Do you ever think of leaving Hill City?" she asked him one evening as they walked along the edge of town. The spring thaw had begun, revealing patches of muddy ground beneath the melting snow. Quentin considered the question. "Sometimes," he admitted. "The territory's changing. More people, more civilization." He said the word with a hint of irony, but I've yet to find a place that feels more like home than here. I never thought I'd end up in Dakota territory, Hannah mused. When I was a girl, I dreamed of Boston or New York, of concerts and libraries and art galleries. You could still go, Quentin said, his voice carefully neutral. Once you've saved enough. Hannah glanced at him. Are you trying to get rid of me, Mr. Eastwood? A smile touched his lips. Not at all, just wondering what you want for your future. It was a good question, one Hannah had been asking herself lately. I'm not sure anymore, she said honestly. For so long, survival was my only goal. Now. She trailed off, then continued softly. Now I find myself wanting more than just to survive. I want to live. Quentin's eyes held hers. You deserve that, Hannah, more than anyone I know. The intensity in his gaze made her heart beat faster. For a moment, Hannah thought he might reach for her hand or perhaps even kiss her. Instead, he looked away, clearing his throat. It's getting late. I should walk you back. Hannah nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. As they turned back toward town, she wondered if she had imagined the connection between them, if his feelings for her were merely those of a rescuer for the person he'd saved. The next morning, Hill City awoke to unexpected news. Victor Newcombe had been seen in Deadwood, just 20 miles away. Sheriff Thompson brought the information to Hannah personally, catching her as she swept the hotel's front porch. Thought you should know, he said grimly. A deputy from Deadwood recognized him from the description. He was gambling at one of the saloons, apparently doing well for himself. Hannah's hands tightened on the broom handle. Is he coming here? No indication of that, Thompson assured her. But I wanted you to be aware just in case. I've alerted my deputies to keep an eye out. Hannah nodded, forcing herself to remain calm. Thank you, Sheriff. I appreciate the warning. As soon as the sheriff left, Hannah sat heavily on the porch steps, her legs suddenly weak. Victor was alive, was nearby. The fear she'd thought vanquished rushed back, making her hands tremble and her throat constrict. Hannah, Mrs. Foster's voice came from the doorway behind her. Are you unwell? Hannah turned, trying to compose herself. I'm fine, Mrs. Foster, just a moment of weakness. The older woman's shrewd eyes missed nothing. Sheriff Thompson just left. Bad news, briefly, Hannah explained about Victor being spotted in Deadwood. Mrs. Foster's expression hardened. You'll stay close to the hotel for now, she said decisively. No more evening walks, and I'll have my son sleep in the lobby for the next few nights, just in case. Hannah was touched by the protectiveness. That's very kind, but I don't want to disrupt your business. Nonsense, Mrs. Foster said briskly. You're one of us now. We take care of our own in Hill City. The words, an echo of what Quentin had told her weeks ago, brought tears to Hannah's eyes. Word spread quickly through the small town. By evening, Hannah had received visits from Dr. Miller, Margaret Wilson, and several other concerned citizens, all offering reassurances and support. But Quentin didn't come, and Hannah found herself watching the door anxiously, hoping for his steady presence. It wasn't until nearly midnight, as Hannah was preparing for bed in her small room, that she heard a soft knock at her door. Cautiously, she approached it. Who is it, Quentin? Came the low reply. Hannah opened the door to find him standing in the dimly lit hallway, his expression grim. Without a word, he held out a small revolver. What's this? She asked, though the answer was obvious. Protection, Quentin said simply, in case he comes for you. Hannah stared at the weapon. I've never fired a gun. I'll teach you tomorrow. For tonight, just keep it close. His eyes met hers, intense and serious. I'd stay if I could, but it wouldn't be proper, Hannah finished for him, managing a small smile. I understand, and I'll be fine, truly. Mrs. Foster has her son standing guard downstairs, and the sheriff has increased patrols. Quentin nodded but didn't look entirely convinced. Just be careful. Victor knows you can identify him, testify against him for attempted murder. That makes you dangerous to him. Hannah accepted the revolver, feeling its unfamiliar weight in her hand. I will, thank you. Quentin hesitated, then reached out to brush a stray lock of hair from her face, his fingers lingering against her cheek. I couldn't bear it if something happened to you, he said softly. Before Hannah could respond, he turned and disappeared down the hallway, leaving her standing in the doorway, her heart racing from more than fear. True to his word, Quentin arrived the next morning to teach Hannah how to use the revolver. Mrs. Foster gave her an hour off, and they walked to a clearing behind the livery stable where Quentin had set up makeshift targets. It's loaded with 5 rounds, he explained, showing her how to hold the weapon. Always assume a gun is loaded, even when you think it isn't. Never point it at anything you don't intend to shoot. Hannah listened carefully, focusing on his instructions rather than on the warmth of his body as he stood behind her, guiding her arms into the proper position. His hands were steady on hers as he taught her how to aim, how to brace for the recoil. Now squeeze the trigger slowly. Don't jerk it, he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. Hannah did as instructed, startling slightly at the loud report despite being prepared for it. The bullet went wide of the target, burying itself in the dirt beyond. Good, Quentin said encouragingly. Again. They practiced until Hannah had emptied the revolver, with 2 of her shots actually hitting the target. Quentin reloaded the weapon for her, then watched as she fired again with more confidence. You're a quick learner, he said when she'd finished the second round. Keep practicing and you'll be a decent shot in no time. Let's hope I never need to use it for real, Hannah replied, carefully engaging the safety as he'd shown her. Quentin's expression grew serious. If Victor comes for you, don't hesitate. Don't try to reason with him. Just shoot. The intensity in his voice made Hannah look up sharply. You really believe he'll come, don't you? I think a man who would leave his wife to die in the woods is capable of anything, Quentin said grimly. And I think he's the type to resent that you survived, that you might testify against him. Hannah considered this, then nodded slowly. I'll be careful, but I refuse to live in fear, Quentin. I've done that already and it's no kind of life at all. A hint of admiration flickered in Quentin's eyes. You're the bravest woman I've ever met, Hannah Newcombe. Hannah laughed softly. Not brave, just stubborn. Call it what you will, Quentin replied, his gaze holding hers. It's one of the things I admire most about you. The simple statement, delivered with such sincerity, made Hannah's breath catch. For a long moment they stood in silence, something unspoken passing between them. Finally, Hannah broke the tension. I should get back to work. Mrs. Foster will think I've run off. Quentin nodded. I'll walk you back. As they returned to the hotel, Hannah was acutely aware of Quentin's protective presence beside her, of the way his eyes scanned the street continuously. It should have made her feel anxious, but instead she felt strangely safe, knowing he was watching over her. That night, lying in bed with the revolver on her nightstand, Hannah thought about Quentin, about his quiet strength, his unwavering support, the tenderness she sometimes glimpsed beneath his reserved exterior. She thought about the way his fingers had felt against her cheek, the warmth in his eyes when he looked at her. Was it possible she was falling in love with him? The idea both thrilled and frightened her. After Victor, she'd sworn never to trust a man again, never to give anyone that kind of power over her. But Quentin wasn't Victor. From the moment he'd found her in the woods, he'd asked for nothing in return for his help, had respected her boundaries and supported her independence. Hannah drifted off to sleep, thinking of blue eyes and gentle hands, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't dream of the snow and Victor's retreating figure. Days passed with no sign of Victor. The town gradually relaxed its vigilance, though Hannah continued to carry the revolver whenever she left the hotel. Quentin remained watchful, but his visits returned to their normal pattern: casual conversations over coffee, occasional walks when Hannah's duties allowed. April arrived, bringing warmer weather and the first wildflowers to the hills around town. Hannah had been in Hill City for nearly 3 months now, and increasingly it felt like home. She had friends, meaningful work, and a growing sense of her own strength and resilience. And she had Quentin, whose presence in her life had become as essential as breathing. Though neither of them had spoken of deeper feelings, Hannah sensed a shift in their relationship: lingering glances, casual touches that seemed anything but casual, conversations that edged toward subjects more intimate than friendship typically allowed. On a particularly fine spring day, Mrs. Foster surprised Hannah by giving her an entire afternoon off. "You've earned it," the older woman said gruffly. "You work harder than anyone I've ever employed." Hannah didn't need to be told twice. She changed quickly into her best dress, a deep blue calico that Sarah Johnson had given her, saying it matched her eyes, and set out to find Quentin. She knew he'd returned from a hunting expedition the previous day, and would likely be at the livery stable or perhaps at the small cabin he kept at the edge of town. She found him at the stable, grooming Buck while conversing with the liveryman, Jacob Ross. Both men looked up as she approached, and Hannah didn't miss the way Quentin's eyes widened slightly at the sight of her in the blue dress. "Hannah," he greeted her, setting down the brush. "Is everything all right?" "Everything's fine," she assured him. "Mrs. Foster gave me the afternoon off, and I thought perhaps—" She hesitated, suddenly nervous. "That is, if you're not busy, I wondered if you might like to go for a ride." Quentin's smile was answer enough. "I'd like that very much." Within minutes, he had saddled Buck and borrowed a gentle mare named Daisy for Hannah. They rode out of town at a leisurely pace, heading toward the hills where the wildflowers were beginning to bloom. Hannah had learned to ride during her time with Victor, a necessary skill for a frontier wife, but she'd never enjoyed it until now, with Quentin beside her, and no destination more pressing than wherever the path might lead. They stopped in a meadow bordered by pines, where yellow and purple wildflowers dotted the new grass. Quentin spread his coat on the ground, and they sat side by side, looking out over the valley where Hill City nestled among the trees. "It's beautiful," Hannah said softly. "I never noticed before. I was too busy surviving." Quentin nodded in understanding. "The Black Hills have their own kind of beauty, not as grand as the mountains further west, perhaps, but more intimate." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the spring breeze playing with Hannah's hair. Finally, Hannah gathered her courage and turned to face Quentin directly. "I wanted to thank you," she began. Quentin shook his head. "You've thanked me enough, Hannah. No, not just for saving my life, though I'll always be grateful for that." She took a deep breath. "I want to thank you for seeing me, really seeing me. Not as a victim or a charity case, or even just as a woman who needs protection. You've treated me as an equal, as someone with value and strength of her own. That's meant more to me than you can know." Quentin looked at her intently, his blue eyes serious. "You are the strongest person I've ever known, Hannah. What happened to you would have broken most people. But you've built a new life, made friends, earned respect. You've done that, not me." Hannah smiled, touched by his words. "Perhaps. But having someone believe in me made all the difference." She hesitated, then added softly, "Having you believe in me." Something shifted in Quentin's expression, a softening, a vulnerability she'd never seen before. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. "Hannah," he began, his voice husky with emotion, "I need to tell you something." Before he could continue, the sound of approaching hoofbeats made them both turn. A rider was coming up the path toward them, pushing his horse hard. As he drew closer, Hannah recognized Sheriff Thompson, his face grim. Quentin stood quickly, helping Hannah to her feet as the sheriff reined in beside them. "What is it?" Quentin demanded, his hand moving instinctively to the revolver at his hip. "Victor Newcombe," Thompson said, his breath coming fast. "He's in Hill City, asking for his wife." Hannah felt as though the ground had dropped from beneath her feet. Only Quentin's steadying hand on her arm kept her upright. "How?" she whispered. "How did he find me?" "Overheard some miners talking in Deadwood, apparently," Thompson explained. "About the woman whose husband left her for dead, how a local hunter saved her. Wasn't hard to put together who they meant." "Where is he now?" Quentin asked, his voice dangerously calm. "At the saloon." "I told him I'd need to confirm his wife was even in town before I could help him." The sheriff looked at Hannah apologetically. "Thought it best to play along while I warned you. He seems unpredictable." Hannah nodded numbly. "What does he want?" "Claims he wants to reconcile," Thompson said skeptically. "Says it was all a terrible misunderstanding, that he never meant to hurt you." A bitter laugh escaped Hannah. "He left me bleeding in the snow. That's quite a misunderstanding." Quentin's grip on her arm tightened slightly. "You're not seeing him," he said firmly. Hannah looked up at him, surprised by the vehemence in his tone. "I don't intend to," she assured him. "But what options do I have? If I stay in Hill City, he'll find me eventually." "You could press charges," Thompson suggested. "Attempted murder would put him away for years, maybe for good." "It would be my word against his," Hannah pointed out. "And Victor can be very convincing when he wants to be." "There's another option," Quentin said quietly, all eyes turned to him. "We could leave, tonight. Head west, maybe to Wyoming or Montana, somewhere he couldn't find you." Hannah stared at him. I wouldn't let you go alone," Quentin said simply. As if it were the most obvious thing in the world, the sheriff cleared his throat. "That might work, but it would mean leaving your life here behind. And there's no guarantee he wouldn't follow." Hannah's mind raced. The thought of running, of starting over yet again, exhausted her. But facing Victor, she wasn't sure she had the strength for that either. "I need to think," she said finally. "Can you keep him occupied for a while longer, Sheriff?" Thompson nodded. "I'll tell him you're out of town, that I've sent a deputy to fetch you back. Should buy you a few hours at least." "Thank you." Hannah turned to Quentin. "We should go back, I need." She trailed off, unsure what she needed beyond safety and time to process. "Of course," Quentin agreed, already moving toward the horses. "Let's get you somewhere safe, then decide what to do." They rode back to town in tense silence, taking a roundabout path to avoid being seen. Quentin led her not to the hotel but to his own small cabin at the edge of town. "Victor will check the hotel first," he explained as he ushered her inside. "You'll be safer here for now." The cabin was simple but clean, with a single room containing a bed, a table with 2 chairs, a small stove, and a few shelves holding books and supplies. It smelled of wood smoke and leather and something uniquely Quentin. "Sit," Quentin urged, gesturing toward a chair. "I'll make coffee." Hannah sat, grateful for something to focus on besides her racing thoughts. She watched as Quentin moved efficiently around the small space, building up the fire in the stove and setting water to boil. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly. "I've brought this trouble to your door." Quentin turned to look at her, his expression serious. "Don't apologize. None of this is your fault. But you're involved now. You might have to leave your home because of me." Quentin was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "Home isn't always a place, Hannah." The simple statement hung in the air between them, laden with meaning. Hannah's breath caught as she understood what he was trying to say. "Quentin," she began, but he shook his head, turning back to the stove. "We don't have to decide anything right now," he said. "Let's just focus on keeping you safe." They drank their coffee in silence, both lost in thought. As the afternoon wore on, Hannah found herself watching Quentin, the way his hands wrapped around his cup, the thoughtful furrow of his brow, the steady rise and fall of his chest as he breathed. The idea of leaving with him, of building a new life somewhere far from here, was becoming less frightening by the minute. "What were you going to tell me?" she asked suddenly. Before the sheriff arrived. Quentin looked up, startled by the question. "I'm not sure this is the time, please," Hannah interrupted. "With everything so uncertain, I'd like to know." Quentin set down his cup and met her gaze directly. "I was going to tell you that I love you," he said simply. "That I have since the moment I found you in those woods, though I didn't realize it then. That I've never met anyone as brave or kind or strong as you are. That I understand if you don't feel the same way, especially after everything you've been through, but that I would wait for as long as it took, if there was any chance at all." Hannah's eyes filled with tears. For months, she'd been afraid to name the feelings growing within her, afraid that loving again meant risking the kind of pain Victor had inflicted. But sitting here, looking into Quentin's honest blue eyes, she realized that not loving him, not taking this chance, would be the greater risk. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I've known it for a while, but I was afraid. After Victor, I thought I'd never trust anyone again. But you—" She smiled through her tears. "You carried me 10 miles through the snow without even knowing my name. You've never asked for anything in return. You've given me time and space and support. How could I not love you?" Quentin's face transformed, hope and joy replacing the tension that had been there moments before. He rose from his chair and knelt beside hers, taking her hands in his. "Hannah," he said earnestly, "no matter what happens with Victor, no matter where we end up, I promise I will never let anyone hurt you again. I will spend every day trying to be worthy of your trust." Hannah reached out to touch his face, marveling at the openness she found there. "I believe you," she said softly. "That's what scares me the most." Quentin turned his head to press a kiss to her palm, then looked up at her with a question in his eyes. Hannah nodded, and he leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. Their first kiss was gentle, almost tentative, a soft press of lips that conveyed more tenderness than passion. When they parted, Hannah felt as though something inside her that had been broken was finally beginning to heal. A knock at the door shattered the moment. Quentin was on his feet instantly, one hand reaching for his revolver as he moved between Hannah and the door. "Who is it?" he called, his voice steady. "Sheriff Thompson," came the reply. Quentin opened the door cautiously, relaxing slightly when he confirmed it was indeed the sheriff. Thompson entered quickly, his expression grave. "Newcombe's getting impatient," he reported. "Says if his wife doesn't show up by nightfall, he'll start looking for her himself. I've got deputies watching him, but I can't hold him indefinitely without cause." "What about the attempted murder?" Quentin demanded. "Without physical evidence, it's her word against his." The sheriff looked apologetically at Hannah. "I believe you, Mrs. Newcombe, but the law requires more than that." Hannah stood, her decision made. "I want to see him." Both men turned to her in surprise. "Hannah, no," Quentin protested. "Not alone," she clarified. "With both of you present. In your office, Sheriff, with the door locked and your deputies nearby." "Why would you risk that?" Quentin asked, clearly alarmed. Hannah's expression was resolute. "Because I'm tired of running. Because I refuse to let him drive me from another home. And because if I face him now, on my terms, with people who support me, maybe I can finally be free of him for good." The sheriff considered this. "It could work. If he makes threats or admits to what he did, I'd have cause to arrest him." "And if he doesn't?" Quentin challenged. "Then at least I've looked him in the eye and shown him I'm not afraid," Hannah said quietly. "That has to be worth something." Quentin studied her face for a long moment, then nodded reluctantly. "All right. But I'll be with you every second, and at the first sign of trouble, we leave." Hannah agreed, grateful for his support even in disagreement. "When?" "Now," Thompson said decisively, "before he gets any drunker or more volatile." They made their way to the sheriff's office, taking back alleys to avoid being seen. Thompson went ahead to prepare, and Quentin and Hannah followed a few minutes later. Hannah's heart pounded as they approached the small building, but she kept her head high, drawing strength from Quentin's solid presence beside her. Inside, the sheriff had arranged the room as Hannah had requested, his desk between the door and a chair where Victor would sit, deputies stationed outside, and Thompson himself positioned near the gun cabinet. Quentin guided Hannah to a seat behind the desk, then took up position just behind her, one hand resting protectively on her shoulder. "Ready?" Thompson asked. Hannah took a deep breath and nodded. "Ready." The sheriff opened the door and stepped outside briefly. Voices murmured, and then Victor Newcombe strode into the room. Hannah's first thought was how unchanged he was, still handsome in a sharp, predatory way, still carrying himself with the confidence of a man who expected the world to bend to his will. His eyes found her immediately, and a smile spread across his face that didn't reach his cold eyes. "Hannah," he said, his voice warm with false sincerity. "My dear wife, I've been so worried about you." Hannah didn't respond, simply watching him with steady eyes as he took the seat opposite her. She felt Quentin's hand tighten slightly on her shoulder. "Mr. Newcombe," Sheriff Thompson said formally, "you claimed you wanted to speak with your wife about a misunderstanding. Here she is." Victor's smile faltered slightly at the sheriff's tone, but he recovered quickly. "Hannah, sweetheart, there's been a terrible mistake. I've been searching for you for months." "Have you?" Hannah's voice was steady, betraying none of the turmoil she felt. "How surprising, considering you left me bleeding in the snow." Victor's expression shifted to one of pained confusion. "Is that what you think happened? My God, no wonder you've been hiding from me." He leaned forward earnestly. "You fell, Hannah, hit your head. You were confused, hysterical. I went for help, but when I returned with a doctor, you were gone. I've been frantic ever since." It was a good performance. Once, Hannah might have believed him, might have doubted her own memories in the face of his conviction. But not anymore. "You struck me with your pistol," she said evenly. "Then you took a knife to my side when I tried to get away. You told me I was holding you back, that you'd be better off without me. Then you took our horse and supplies and rode away, leaving me to die." Victor's facade cracked slightly, irritation flashing in his eyes. "You always did have a vivid imagination, Hannah. Why would I try to kill my own wife?" "For the same reason you beat her regularly," Quentin interjected coldly. "Because you're a coward who enjoys hurting those weaker than himself." Victor's head snapped up, truly seeing Quentin for the first time. "And who might you be?" "The man who found your wife half dead and carried her 10 miles through the snow to save her life," Quentin replied, his voice dangerously soft. Something ugly twisted Victor's features. "Ah, I see. You found yourself a protector, Hannah. Or is he more than that? Have you been whoring yourself out to this cowboy?" Hannah felt Quentin tense behind her, knew he was restraining himself from violence only for her sake. "My relationship with Mr. Eastwood is none of your concern," she said calmly. "Our marriage ended the moment you left me to die." Victor laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Our marriage ends when I say it ends, dear wife. You belong to me by law and by God. I've come to take you home, and home you will go whether you like it or not." "I'm not going anywhere with you, Victor." His expression hardened. "You don't have a choice. A wife belongs with her husband. No court will say otherwise. A husband who attempts to murder his wife forfeits any claim on her," Sheriff Thompson interrupted. "Now, Mr. Newcombe, I suggest you leave Hill City while you still can. Mrs. Newcombe has made her wishes clear." Victor ignored him, his gaze fixed on Hannah. "You think these people care about you? They're using you just like this cowboy is. When they tire of you, they'll cast you aside. Only I truly know you, Hannah. Only I can give you what you need." Hannah met his gaze unflinchingly. "What I need? What I needed was a husband who didn't beat me. What I needed was someone who valued me as a person, not a possession. What I needed was love, Victor, and you never gave me that." "Love," Victor spat the word. "Love is for children and fools. I gave you security, status, a future. And this is how you repay me, by spreading lies, by sullying my good name." "You sullied your own name when you tried to kill her," Quentin said flatly. Victor's control finally snapped. He surged to his feet, reaching inside his coat. "You filthy whore," he snarled at Hannah. "If I can't have you, no one will." Everything happened at once. Thompson shouted a warning, reaching for his gun. Victor produced a small pistol from inside his coat. And Quentin moved like lightning, shoving the desk hard into Victor's midsection while simultaneously pulling Hannah down and away. A shot rang out, deafening in the small room. Hannah heard a cry of pain but couldn't tell who had been hit. Then more shots, more shouting, and the sound of bodies struggling. When she dared to look up, Victor was on the floor, blood spreading across his chest. Sheriff Thompson stood over him, gun still drawn, while two deputies rushed into the room, their own weapons ready. "Quentin," Hannah called frantically, realizing he was no longer beside her. "Here." His voice came from behind her, strained but alive. "I'm all right." Hannah turned to see him leaning against the wall, his left arm bleeding from what appeared to be a graze wound. She was at his side in an instant, examining the injury with trembling hands. "It's nothing," he assured her. "Barely a scratch." "Victor?" she asked, not turning to look. "Dead," Thompson confirmed grimly. "Shot him when he tried to fire again." Hannah closed her eyes briefly, a complex mixture of emotions washing over her: relief, regret, and finally, a profound sense of freedom. Victor could never hurt her again, never threaten her, never cast his shadow over her life. When she opened her eyes, she found Quentin watching her with concern. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. Hannah considered the question carefully, then nodded. "I think I will be," she said. "For the first time in years, I think I really will be." In the weeks that followed, life in Hill City gradually returned to normal. There had been an inquest into Victor's death, but with multiple witnesses to his attempted murder of Hannah, the sheriff was quickly cleared of any wrongdoing. Victor was buried in the town cemetery, in an unmarked grave that Hannah visited only once, to say a final goodbye to the man she had once believed she loved. Hannah continued working at the hotel, though Mrs. Foster insisted on a raise after all the unnecessary drama, as she put it. Quentin's wound healed quickly, leaving only a thin scar that Hannah would trace with her fingertips when they were alone. They were together often now, no longer hiding their feelings. They took meals together, walked openly through town, sat side by side in church on Sundays. The townspeople watched their courtship with approving eyes, seeing in it the kind of redemption story that gave hope to everyone. On a warm evening in late May, Quentin took Hannah back to the meadow where they had first confessed their love. Wildflowers bloomed in profusion now, painting the grass with yellows and purples and whites. They sat on Quentin's coat as the sun began to set, casting golden light across the valley below. "I've been thinking," Quentin said after they had sat in comfortable silence for a while. Hannah turned to him, smiling. "A dangerous pastime," he laughed, some of his usual reserve melting away. "Perhaps, but I've been thinking about the future, our future, if you want there to be one." Hannah's heart quickened. "I do," she said softly. Quentin took her hand, his expression suddenly serious. I know it might be too soon. After everything with Victor, I'd understand if you wanted to wait. But I want you to know that whenever you're ready, if you're ever ready, I want to marry you, Hannah." Hannah looked into his earnest blue eyes and saw everything she had once thought she'd never have: love, respect, partnership. "Are you proposing to me, Quentin Eastwood?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Not exactly," he replied, reaching into his pocket. "This is me proposing." He produced a small ring, simple but beautiful, a single pearl set in silver. "It was my mother's," he explained. "The only thing of hers I have left. I've carried it for years, waiting for the right person. I never thought I'd find her until I saw you lying in the snow that day." Tears filled Hannah's eyes as he continued. "I'm not a rich man, Hannah. I can't give you mansions or fine things. But I can promise you this. I will love you honestly and completely for all my days. I will respect you as my equal and partner in all things. I will never raise a hand to you in anger. And I will spend every day trying to be worthy of the gift of your love." Hannah couldn't speak for a moment, overwhelmed by emotion. Finally, she found her voice. "The day you found me in the woods, I had given up. I thought my life was over, that everything I might have been or done was lost. But you didn't just save my life, Quentin. You gave me the chance to discover my own strength, to build something new from the ruins. You saw value in me when I couldn't see it in myself." She took a deep breath, her eyes shining with tears and joy. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I will marry you, Quentin Eastwood. Not because I need your protection or because I'm afraid to be alone, but because I love you and because I want to build a life with you." Quentin's face lit with a smile more brilliant than any she had seen before. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into his arms, kissing her with a tenderness that made her heart ache. "When?" he asked when they finally parted. "When would you like to marry?" Hannah considered. "Soon," she decided. "I don't want a long engagement or a fancy wedding. Just us and our friends here in Hill City." "Next month," Quentin suggested. "That would give us time to prepare, to find a place of our own." "Actually," Hannah said hesitantly, "I've been thinking about that too, about where we might live." When Quentin looked at her questioningly, she continued, "What would you think about leaving Hill City? Not right away, but eventually." Quentin seemed surprised. "I thought you had come to love it here." "I have," Hannah assured him. "The people here saved me in more ways than one. But I've been thinking about those dreams I told you about, the concerts and libraries and art galleries. Maybe we could have both. Maybe we could build a life somewhere that has wilderness for you and culture for me." "Colorado, perhaps," Quentin suggested, warming to the idea. "Denver's growing fast, has theaters and such, but the mountains are right there." Hannah nodded eagerly. "We could start fresh, both of us. No more being the woman who was left for dead or the cowboy who saved her. Just Hannah and Quentin Eastwood building a future together." Quentin pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Wherever you want to go, I'll follow. As long as we're together, I don't much care about the place." They were married on a perfect June day in the small church in Hill City. Hannah wore a cream-colored dress that the women of the town had worked together to make, with wildflowers in her hair instead of a veil. Quentin wore a new shirt and his cleanest trousers, his hair trimmed but still long enough to curl slightly at his collar. Dr. Miller gave the bride away, Mrs. Foster wept openly despite her usual stoicism, and Sheriff Thompson served as Quentin's best man. The entire town turned out for the celebration afterward, a feast held in the hotel dining room that lasted well into the evening. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the main street, the newlyweds slipped away to Quentin's cabin, their cabin now, at least until they set out for Colorado in the fall. Hannah had moved her few possessions there the day before, her blue calico dress hanging beside Quentin's shirts, her books nestled among his on the small shelf. Standing in the doorway, Quentin suddenly swept Hannah into his arms, making her laugh with surprise. "What are you doing?" she asked as he carried her over the threshold. "Being traditional," he replied with a smile, "carrying my bride home." "You've carried me before," Hannah reminded him, her arms around his neck. 10 miles through the snow, as I recall." Quentin set her down gently, his eyes serious despite his smile. "And I'd do it again in a heartbeat, but I prefer carrying you towards something rather than away from danger." Hannah reached up to touch his face, marveling at how far they had both come since that terrible day in the woods. "I love you, Quentin Eastwood." "And I love you, Hannah Eastwood," he replied, the new name making her heart swell with joy. As darkness fell outside, they came together as husband and wife, their love a healing balm for all the wounds of the past. And later, as Hannah drifted toward sleep in Quentin's arms, she thought about the strange twists of fate that had brought her here, how her husband's cruelty had ultimately led her to true love, how being left for dead had given her the chance to truly live. "What are you thinking about?" Quentin murmured, his voice drowsy. Hannah smiled in the darkness. "About how endings can sometimes be beginnings in disguise." He pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her hair. "This is just our beginning," he promised. "The best is yet to come." And in the years that followed, as they made their way to Colorado, as Quentin established himself as a guide in the Rockies, as Hannah found work at Denver's first public library, as their family grew to include 2 sons and a daughter, Hannah often thought back to that promise, made on their wedding night. Quentin had been right. What they had found together was more than survival, more than safety, more even than love. They had found home in each other, and that was the greatest beginning of all.